Welcome everyone to Resume 101 session. Today I'm going to talk about a resume of formatting, why it is important, what are the key points that we need to consider. We'll also talk about how to format or structure a resume that is ATS compliant, as well as we'll talk about the LinkedIn profile and how it is important in this important for a resume as well, and how it is linked to the resume. So okay, let's get going then. So purpose of the resume. The overall objective of a resume is to provide you an opportunity to get an interview. So that's one important thing to note, is that we would want to add value to the organization. We want to bring value to the organization, and this is what we want to tell the employer, that we can fit into their culture and we can add value to their organization. So these are key things to consider. Then resume formatting. There are some important things that we need to consider, do's and don'ts, like stick to a standard format. Like there are three I would recommend: Garamond, Arial, Calibri. Wherever possible, just use that. Some people also use New Times Roman as well, but I would recommend using these three. Stick to a font size 11, just don't go below that. If the space allows, for sure, size 11.5 or 12. Use single line space, as well as margin is also important. Like stick to a margin between 0.5 to 1. If you have, just standardize it. Don't do 3.35 on the left side and 0.5 on the right side. It's not going to work like that. Okay, so just make sure that you have a standard margin on your resume. So no photo. Since I am in Canada, America, we don't have a culture of putting a photo in, but it really depends. If in your culture it's photo is important, then continue doing it. But in terms of the Canadian resume, we should not be putting in any photo on that. We'll continue. So avoid using symbols, diagram, quotation marks, or hyperlink. Hyperlinks would cause an error, as well as avoid using italics, underlines, horizontal lines, long vertical lines. We'll talk about that. We can use short vertical lines, where to use them, I'll tell you later. And no tables in the resume as well. You know, like the ATS system, and those of you who are wondering what ATS is the it's the resume automated resume system that is being used these days. That is also called the application tracking system, and then they would shortlist resume based on the ATS. So avoid using multi-column resume as well, because they are also not compatible they're not compatible to ATS, especially if there are columns on the right side. It's going to be an issue with the resume. Sometimes with there are a few modern resume that would allow the left side column and deduct that, but I would still recommend to avoid column. Just try to keep your resume as simple as possible. And do not use header and footer as well. When you're sending this document or your resume to an employer or an HR, just you send a Word or a PDF file. ATS use an algorithm, we have talked about it, to scan your resume that cannot read many things as listed in the previous 2 or 3 slides. So just keep those things into consideration. Once you perfect the formatting, make sure that you tailor your resume application by adding relevant keywords from the job description. Like there are some keywords or optimization of keywords which are very important for your resume. For example, I would give you an example, or just select, like for example, if you're applying for a project manager role or a senior project role, just select 3 to 5 job descriptions. Let's say go to Indeed, select 3 to 5 similar job listings, combine them all, and then try to find some keywords that are being used by all employers, and then try to put those keywords into your resume. One very good resource is the tagcrowd.com. Just go to that website, and then you the document that you have created, like the job description that you shortlisted, just put that within that tagcrowd.com website, and you will get the keywords out of there. And you can also customize that according to your need. If you need 10 keywords, you need 15, you want to have 12, so you customize that, and you get those key words highlighted from the other job roles or the role that you're applying for, and then try to include that as part of your resume. A few other things to note while doing your resume or developing or building your resume. Resume must clearly showcase transferable skills and achievements. Focus on how you would benefit the employer. So that is also very important. Then the professional experience, in my opinion, we should stick to until 2008, and we should not go beyond that. But some would say like 15 years. So let's say 2005 to 2000, starting from 2005, you're good to include that in your resume. So earlier works experience, I'll tell you how and where to include that and how to address that. But importantly, I don't think that if someone is working in an IT field, employer would not be interested what was going on 12, 13 years ago in IT domain, since things have changed and evolved a lot in the recent years. Education in your resume, you should also not include the graduation dates, but that said, this is all for the experienced people. But if you're new, you have recently graduated, for sure, you follow that, put your graduation date in there, and you have, if you have experience less than 5 years, I think it's no harm putting in your date of when you qualified. Mention level of education in the opening paragraph of the summary of your resume, as well as LinkedIn. For anyone with 1 year, more than 1 year of gap, which is significant, should address that briefly in a cover letter or an email when submitting a resume. So for example, you had to take a medical leave break, you had a personal reason, you had to take a break because of the childbirth. Just mention that very briefly in the resume, and you can certainly talk about it in detail when you go for the interview. So use standard section title. For example, use professional experience instead of my career progression kind of phrases. And resume length is very important to also to note. So it should be between 1 to 3 pages, depending on the years of experience and your profession. So for the freshers, for those who have less than 5 years of experience, I would recommend that you should use 1 page. So for folks who have 5 years or maybe up to 7 years, should restrict yourself up to 1 page. I don't know how you do it, but you have to do it the way that you can fit your experience in 1 page. For those folks who have more than 7 years or 10 years or 15 years experience, they should be using 2 pages at the max. There are exceptions always, like if you are in academia, you have a long list of publications, you can use 3 or more pages for your CV because it's a different requirement for them. If there's a physician who works with 4 or 5 hospitals, also teaches at the university, they can go beyond, and they can go beyond 3 pages or up to 3 pages, since they have lots to cover. These examples also fit on the project managers, because if you manage lots of projects at one time, for example, I managed 4 or 5 projects at the same time with large scope and budget, and have a different audience, stakeholders for each of those projects, I think I'll be willing to or wanting to mention all those projects in my resume. So project managers with significant number of years of experience can also go up to 3 pages in terms of resume. So we have talked about the formatting. We have talked about also what the key things to consider about when we are building the resume. So let's jump into the real thing, how the resume is going to look like, or is going to be formatted, or how we should be structuring it. So this is the example of my resume. So that's how I do it. So that's what I am proposing that you should follow as well. And I've researched it. It's an industry standard. I've read about it. And these are a few of the key things that I'm going to highlight here for you. So you start with a name, put that in bold, a little bit of a larger font. Then you only include location, phone number, and email at the top. Then include your LinkedIn profile information, which is very important these days as well, because whether you like it or not, the employer tend to go and look at your social media profile. So be careful and be cautious of the fact what you are posting. And for the LinkedIn, we can certainly need to align those with your resume so that when employer visit the LinkedIn profile, it's there. So LinkedIn, we'll talk about it later. So you would see that I have put 3 top titles on top of my resume, like Senior Project Manager, IT, Program Manager, Direct Programs. So these are, you can choose to put 2 titles. You can choose to put 3 titles. It's up to you, and it's up to the requirement that you're looking for. For example, you are doing a job hunt. I would recommend putting in 3 titles, which are very relevant, right? Just don't put anything that is not relevant at all. Like, for example, if you are putting in that you are a chef, and then you are a project manager, and then you are also a baseball player. So these are probably different professions. So try to find out your niche, try to find where you want to apply and put those as title. And you would see a notice on the right side, I've put O&O for LinkedIn. This means that this is important these days, that if you're open to new opportunity, this is a hashtag that you would be putting on top of your LinkedIn profile if you're looking and hunting for a job. So we'll start with the professional summaries. For those of folks who have more than 7-10 years experience, they should go for 7 lines at the start of the professional summary. And for those of you who would have to stick to 1 page, just focus on summarizing your experiences to 4 lines. So 4 to 7 lines, in between 4 to 7 lines, you should be good. So core competencies and achievements should be the second heading for you. So 5 to 7 bullets I would recommend putting in there. Where you're going to get these bullets from? So go to your professional experience. Within that, in the resume, you must have included the achievements and competencies as part of your professional experience. So pull those out from there. From the professional experiences, and then pull that out and put that as part of the core competencies and achievement section. Please make sure that the examples that you're providing are quantifiable or are measurable, and can also generate interest of the reader. And remind you that this is the only first page that employer or the hiring manager are going to have a quick scan, because now we hear that they have only 6 to 10 seconds to review each resume. So they would have a quick glance. So just focus on the professional summary and core competency. And I think that's what the hiring manager is going to be able to look at within 6 to 8 seconds. So what to include, just I can give you an example. For example, you work with a charity or with a not-for-profit organization, you help them and you help them raise funding. So just say that I help the organization raise 300% more funding last year. Or if you are able to save on some cost for your organization, you can also say that I was instrumental in helping my organization save 25% of the operational cost because of my project. Then in terms of the project professional experience, I've already talked about it. Maximum last 15 years of experience we should be considering and should be including. And that's what I would suggest. I would even suggest include up to 12 years within your professional experience. And there's a way to address the other experience as well, which you have gained in your previous life or before the cutoff date, what I'm proposing. So earlier work just include company name, location, job title, and no dates or further details are required in this. So anything beyond 15 years, just include the date and time, date and location, etc. Education, as we have already talked about, preferably no dates. Certification, whatever trainings you have done in the last 5 years or certification, include those. But if you have done your project management professional certification, for example, 8 years ago, for sure you will be including that. For those of you who are just very new, who have just graduated, who have less than 1 year or 2 years of experience, I would recommend them to use a different order for this for their resume. Instead of starting with the professional experience, they can, or you can rather, include the education right after the core competencies. Include the education, and which would be followed by the professional experience. So a little bit of a tweaking for people or who are very fresh and just graduated or have just started their professional career and looking for a job. Then I've already talked about the certification. Let's move on to honors and awards. So scholarships, employee recognition awards, anything that you think that is important to include, just include that. And volunteer experience, which is very relevant to the job that you're applying for, or anything that is very significant. For example, you work serve as one of the board of directors on a charity. You work as an advisor in the fundraising effort of a hospital. So experience like that, try to highlight your community service and where you were able to manage the successful projects or successful initiatives. So that was kind of overall about the resume. Then we move on to the LinkedIn profile. We have talked about it. So the summary in the summary in LinkedIn profile would allow you to have up to 2,500 words put in there. So you have a cushion to include as much as you want. So as we have talked about the resume, so the section of the resume where you have like the professional summary, the core competencies and achievements, include that as part of this initial summary of your LinkedIn summary. And you can further elaborate on that as well and include certification and skills as well. And don't forget to provide your email information in the body of that summary. We should not mention, or we probably are not required to provide the dates for education. So just stick to what we have talked about in the resume. Choose a professional looking good photo that represent, because it's LinkedIn is a professional network. So when employer are looking, you want to present yourself as a professional. So do not use 20 plus years of experience, etc. in any narrative. Focus on transferable skills and the value you could add. By this, I mean that as we have talked about already, there is age bias, even if we admit it or not. So I would not recommend using 20 plus or 18 plus years of experience in your resume. Just stick to under 15 years, okay? And then that was about it. That was the last slide from my presentation. Before we go into the question and answer session, I have put in here my LinkedIn profile. I have my Facebook page as well. Over here, you can follow me, send me a request on LinkedIn, on Facebook. You already have my email. I put there as a record. Just send me an email. Any follow-up question, I'll be happy to answer and happy to connect with you and provide you more details on not only on resume building, but on several other capacity building initiatives. So I'm open to questions and answer now. And if there's any question, please feel free to ask.